Good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nella, Communication Officer at ACE, and I will be the MC for the workshop today. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you here this afternoon. I would like to thank you for joining us today for this special occasion on our workshop, Roadmaps Towards Sustainable and Energy Efficient Buildings and Cooling in Southeast Asia, which is hosted by Brunei Darussalam and organized by ASEAN Center for Energy, the International Energy Agency, and the ASEAN Secretariat. I would like to thank you as well to our partner, the ASEAN-Australian Development Cooperation Program Phase 2. The International Energy Agency, in partnership with the ASEAN Center for Energy, the ASEAN Secretariat, the Energy Efficiency and Energy Conservation Subsector Network, and with funding from the ASEAN-Australian Development Cooperation Program Phase 2, is implementing a new project to develop detailed roadmaps for buildings and space cooling in the region. The workshop aims to bring together expert policymakers, academics, architects, engineers, and industry representatives from across Southeast Asia to share their knowledge, experience, and provide inputs into the roadmap process. This workshop is being recorded and the materials will be available on IEA and ACE website shortly after the event. Before we get started, I'm going to go through some of our agenda today. First, we will have the welcoming remarks, keynote address, breakout sessions, breakout summary, and the closing remarks. Here we have two breakout sessions where participants will be given an option to select breakout session 1 or 2. The first one is the Space Cooling Roadmap for Southeast Asia. This session will discuss the importance of sustainable cooling for Southeast Asia and examine the design and implementation of effective policy package for sustainable cooling with a technology focused on air conditioners and electric fans. And the second is the Buildings and Construction Roadmap for Southeast Asia. This session will discuss the importance of energy efficient building design, development and construction, operation and energy systems in Southeast Asia, and examine the design and implementation of effective policy package to support net zero carbon, energy efficient and resilient buildings and construction. Now I would like to remind you some of our guidelines for our meeting today. First, I would like to suggest everyone to silence your cell phone to reduce the noises. Second, participants should turn off their microphone and camera and only turn them on if they wish to present or speak. And the last one, if you wish to ask the presenters a question, please kindly use the chat room and then the speakers will answer your questions. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Abdul Salam bin Abdul Wahab, Head of Sustainable Energy Division, Ministry of Energy, Brunei Darussalam, to deliver the first welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Nila. His Excellency Dr. Nuki Agyautama, Executive Director of ASEAN Center for Energy, ACE, Dr. Pong Pan Borasayan, the Senior Professional Electrical Engineer of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency of Thailand, as the Chair of the ECSSN, Ms. Caroline Scott, Deputy Head of Mission, Australian Mission to ASEAN, distinguished ECSSN focal points from all ASEAN member states, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon and warm greetings from Brunei Darussalam. It is a privilege for me to deliver this welcoming remark for ACE IEA workshop, emphasizing on the roadmaps towards sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling in Southeast Asia, in association with the 25th Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network meeting this year, being hosted by Brunei Darussalam. This workshop serves to allow for regional stakeholders to learn about the roadmap process fit into its design and to hear from leading expert policymakers, academics, architects, engineers, and industry representatives from across Southeast Asia. Brunei Darussalam fully acknowledge the contribution from the ASEAN-Australia Development Cooperation Program Phase 2, AADCP2, for funding the implementation and development of the detailed roadmaps for buildings and space cooling in the region via the International Energy Agency, IEA, in partnership with the ASEAN Center for Energy, ACE, the ASEAN Secretariat, and the EEC subsector network. These collaborative works are for certain of great benefit to all ASEAN member states in developing and implementing strategies, plans, policies, and programs to reduce the energy demand from building and cooling. In addition, collaboration on regional standards fosters shared resources and knowledge and help widen the market for building materials and services. With the world still facing a global challenge with the ongoing pandemic COVID-19, it is crucial more than ever that we work together towards achieving a more sustainable and resilient energy sector towards the region's economic recovery. As we are all aware, the space cooling is the fastest growing energy use in building in Southeast Asia. Proven energy efficiency policy option, including building energy codes, minimum energy performance standard maps, and disclosure of building energy consumption need to be effectively established and developed in order to reduce the energy burden from economic and demographic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, with Brunei Darussalam ASEAN Chairmanship theme of We Care, we prepare and we prosper, Brunei Darussalam will continue to prioritize energy transition and energy security as part of the priority. In view of the growing concerns of climate change as well as volatile energy prices, energy efficiency is regarded as one of the vital strategies for energy transition to support the region's sustainable development. In effort towards pushing for energy transition and energy security, ASEAN member states should not only focus on shifting from fossil fuel to renewable, but it is also important to put focus on energy management, in particular on energy efficiency on cooling. It is also hoped to create a platform to explore the possibility of initiating a concrete resourcing, including financial and investment mechanism to support the energy efficiency and conservation agenda within ASEAN region. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that there are 2 breakout sessions to be held this afternoon. The first breakout session will focus on space cooling roadmap, which will explore the role of policies such as energy efficiency standards and labeling programs and how this can be expanded and improved. Meanwhile, the second breakout session will focus on building and construction roadmap for Southeast Asia, which will discuss the importance of energy efficiency in building design, development and construction, operation and energy system in order to determine effective policy packages to support net zero carbon, energy efficient and resilient building and construction. Both breakout sessions will provide an important platform for all ASEAN member states to identify appropriate policies that can be adopted towards the full establishment of sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling roadmaps in their respective countries. I hope that the ASEAN member state, with the support from ASEAN Center for Energy, as well as our dialogue partners and international organizations, will continue to strengthen our effort in energy efficiency and conservation program area. It is important that we keep the momentum going in engaging with all relevant organizations as well as in transitioning towards a more efficient use of energy by adopting various technologies and accelerating the whole process flow. Let us have an insightful and beneficial workshop this afternoon. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Salam. For the second welcoming remarks, I would like to welcome Dr. Pongpan Farasayan. He is the Senior Engineer of the Energy Regulation and Conservation Division, Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency, Ministry of Energy Thailand, and also a Chair of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network.
Thank you, Nela. Mr. Abdul Salam bin Haji Abdul Wahab, Head of Sustainable Energy Division, Ministry of Energy, Brunei Darussalam. Dr. Nuki Akya Uttama, Executive Director of ASEAN Center for Energy. Mr. Adrian Gilbert, First Secretary, Australian Mission to ASEAN. Good colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency of Thailand as the EE&C Assistant Coordinator. It is our great pleasure to deliver welcoming remarks for a roadmap toward sustainable energy efficient building and cooling in Southeast Asian workshop today. First of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Australian government for supporting the funding through ASEAN Development Cooperation Program Phase 2 or AADCP2 for this project. As you may know, space cooling is considered to be the fastest growing energy use in building globally, with Southeast Asia requiring 200 gigawatts of additional electricity generating capacity by 2040 for cooling alone. The required additional generating capacity will place a heavy socio-economical burden on the ASEAN region, which will greatly affect the well-being of the people, the energy security of the region, the global warming, as well as the region's global competitiveness. This workshop brings together experts from various fields, ranging from policymaker, academic, engineer, to address how energy efficiency may help lessen the aforementioned burden and provide crucial insight into a possible roadmap towards sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling. This workshop is also a part of the activity under 2021 annual priority for energy on developing ASEAN EE building and ASEAN cooling roadmaps. It is also an activity to help the region for sustainable cooling and to help achieve our energy efficiency goal at 32% energy intensity by 2025 under Upper 8 Phase 2. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the support from the the Australian government. I also would like to thank IEA, ACE, and ASEAN Secretariat for your hard work and co-organize this workshop today. Last but not least, I would like to thank Brunei Darussalam for hosting this workshop. I hope that this workshop will serve as a platform for all participants to have discussion and exchange ideas on the roadmap. I wish us all fruitful discussion and deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pongpan. For the last welcoming remarks, please join with us Mr. Adrian Gilbert. He is the first secretary from the Australian mission to ASEAN.
Thank you. Mr. Abdul Salam bin Abdul Wahab, Ministry of Energy, Brunei Darussalam. Dr. Pongpan Vorsayan, Thailand, Ministry of Energy. Dr. Nuki Agya Utama, ASEAN Center for Energy. Ms. Melanie Slade of the International Energy Agency, and our friend and colleague, Ms. Mari Gail Disagon, Head of Energy and Minerals Division at the ASEAN Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Roadmaps Towards Sustainable and Energy Efficient Buildings and Cooling in Southeast Asia workshop, which is supported by the ASEAN Cooperation Program Phase 2, or AADCP2. Brunei is the host, the IEA, ASEAN Secretariat for today's workshop. This is the third collaboration between IEA and ASEAN, which AADCP2 has had the pleasure of supporting. It began with the development prospects of the ASEAN power system, completed in 2015, and continued with the feasibility study for ASEAN multilateral power trade in 2019. And now with the current project, which we're exploring today, on sustainable energy efficient buildings and cooling in ASEAN. We hope that this sustained partnership has been useful and productive in helping progress regional aspirations in the energy sector. AADCP2 is emblematic of the kind of partner Australia is for ASEAN. It is ASEAN-led, it's flexible in its approach, and it's committed to supporting ASEAN and its own priorities. For more than a decade, AADCP2 has been supporting ASEAN across a range of economic sectors, including agriculture, MSME development, services, and investment, alongside emerging cross-cutting initiatives such as connectivity, the fourth industrial revolution, and narrowing the development gap among ASEAN member states. and I'm pleased that energy has emerged as a significant area of support for AADCP2. And I hope to sustain this under a successor program to AADCP2, currently in design and expected to commence next year. AADCP2, along with other programs of Australian support for ASEAN, is closely aligned with ASEAN's priorities, including for COVID-19 recovery, as set out in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its associated work plan. We welcome ASEAN's commitment in the ACRF to facilitate a transition to sustainable energy, and we stand ready to continue to support ASEAN efforts to take this forward, including through AADCP2 and its successor program commencing next year, and other Australian programs of support, such as Partnerships for Infrastructure, a new program which can support ASEAN member states take forward ASEAN commitments and priorities in infrastructure at the national level. So I warmly welcome you all to this workshop, and I wish you a productive and useful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adrian. And now I would like to invite all of the speakers and moderators to turn on your camera, please, as we will have a group photo together. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. I guess one more time. In 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving right along, it is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Nuki Agia-Utama, the Executive Director from ACE, to bring the first keynote address on overview of energy and conservation strategy, program, and target under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC Phase 2.
Thank you, Nila. Your Excellency, Mr. Abdul Salam bin Abdul Wahab, the Head of Sustainable Energy Division, Ministry of Energy Brunei Darussalam, Dr. Pongpan Palan, as Chair of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector, Mr. Adrian Gilbert, the First Secretary of Australian Mission to ASEAN, distinguished representative from the ENC SSN focal points, colleagues from ASEAN Secretariat, and also colleagues from IEA, and representative from member states. Good morning and good afternoon to you all. On behalf of the ASEAN Center for Energy, it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to the first workshop of our roadmaps towards sustainable and energy efficient buildings and cooling in Southeast Asia. I also would like to thank all participants for taking time out of their schedules to participate in this workshop. This virtual workshop is very timely and aligned with the ACE collaborative goals as the catalyst, knowledge hub, and think tank for energy cooperation, as it aims to bring together experts for policy makers, academics, architects, and engineers, as well as business representatives from across ASEAN region to share their knowledge and experience, as well as provide inputs into the roadmap process. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the 38th ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting, or AMEM, which is hosted virtually by Vietnam last year, endorsed the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC Phase 2, 2021-2025, with a sub-theme of accelerating energy transition and strengthening energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation, to serve as the blueprint for the long-term transformation of ASEAN energy landscape towards sustainable future, serving as a blueprint for the long-term transformation. Under the APAC 2016-2025, this APAC Phase 2, starting this year, 2021, having a list of targets and activities was placed to enhance energy security, resilience, and sustainability for the region. The targets and activities were set forth through the 7 APEC-specific program areas, including energy efficiency and conservation, which is widely regarded as the most cost-effective way to address the energy crisis and to support the transition to a low-carbon economy. Also including promote investment and to create growth, and of course, improve the employment. To achieve the target, ASEAN have the strategies to expand, to harmonize, and to promote energy efficiency standards and labeling on energy-related products, including cooling technologies such as air conditioner, and of course, also strengthen sustainability for energy efficiency in building. These strategies show that efficient building and cooling is a very important matter in ASEAN to accelerate energy transition and strengthen energy resiliency. It is include also the strategies aims to strengthen cooperation through institutional capacity buildings and increasing private sector's involvement, including enhancing public awareness as well as expanding markets for energy efficient products to contribute to energy intensity reduction by 32% based on 2005 level. Meanwhile, we are pleased to have met our EI reduction target under the previous APEC 2016-2020, which achieved the 21% in 2018 based on 2005 levels. This exceeding the 20% target of energy intensity set under the plan. To reach ASEAN currently proposed 32% energy intensity reduction by 2025 will require ASEAN to intensify the partnership and collaboration to expedite the whole process, in particular on harmonizing energy efficiency, policy, and planning, so that more can be done for achieving the ambitious energy intensity reduction in the region. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the strategic roadmaps towards sustainable buildings and coolings are increasingly important. Energy demand in building, especially in the commercial and industrial sectors, is notably growing. Despite the relatively low share in total final energy consumption, the commercial sector is expected to see the highest growth compared to the other sectors. If the EE&C efforts are not met, commercial building will have the most notable demand growth with a growth of 4.8% annually. Similarly, in the residential sectors, electricity is projected to grow steadily until it occupies the largest share of energy demand in the region. It is due to the increased electrification ratio, and the number of electrical appliances used and the number of households also increases. Related to the cooling system, the United Nations Environment Programme United for Efficiency, or UNEP U4E initiative estimate that by 2040, the ASEAN stock of cooling appliances, namely room air conditioners and residential refrigerators, will be almost triple compared to 2020. This will cause the electricity consumption from air conditioner to more than double, while the residential refrigerator is expected to increase by over 80%. The initiative also found annual saving potential at 144 terawatt-hours and 17 terawatt-hours of electricity consumption by 2040 from the transition to energy-efficient air conditioners and residential refrigerators, respectively, fully recognizing the potential. The efficient cooling system deployment and implementation of EE measures in the building sector is crucial. According to the ASEAN EE Best Practice Report, the opportunities exist for significant energy saving measures and emission reduction in the buildings and cooling system by adapting new and refurbishing chiller system. Other measures such as replacing fluorescent bulb with LED, implementing high efficiency air conditioners, and adapting smart control system can also help reduce energy consumption in buildings and cooling system. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, most ASEAN member states have acknowledged the importance of energy efficiency by enacting EE laws, setting national EE targets, and determining EE action plans to achieve their national EE development, and also, of course, regional goals under APEC Phase 2. Is analysis undertaken under the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook that suggests ambitious energy efficiency measures can potentially reduce building cooling energy demand in the region and achieve the regional energy intensity target by 2025. It also includes supporting the EE regional goal. ASEAN develops a sustainable energy efficiency building roadmap and sustainable cooling roadmap. These two roadmaps aim to provide policy recommendation as a pathway to efficient, flexible, and of course, low emission buildings. The process of developing the roadmaps is expected to engage key stakeholders and help them develop and implement strategies, plans, policy, and programs to reduce the energy demand of building, construction sectors, and cooling itself. Moving forward, the member states will conduct a series of information sharing that will enhance the AMS capacity to analyze and implement policies and incentives on sustainable EE in building towards net zero energy consumption, building energy codes, and building envelope system. The opportunities in the smart building sectors will be further explored to advance smart cities in ASEAN. Moreover, to achieve high impact energy efficiency improvement and energy saving, the IMS will examine the benefit of new technologies, market mechanism, and policy support to serve as a basis in strengthening cooperation amongst EE stakeholders. And to support the region, our institution, the ASEAN Center for Energy, has been working on a number of energy efficiency and conservation programs. To name a few, including the establishment of product registration system for cooling products supported by U4E and UNEP, and also harmonized CSPF standards supported by JAIF Japan. ACE also produced several publications to support the adoption of higher energy efficiency standards, promoting regional harmonization on energy efficiency product standards, greater private participation, and of course, sustainable building. So ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I wish you a productive, insightful discussion today. Please feel free to share your knowledge, your opinion, and of course, your inputs to further benefit to the member states. Thank you very much for your attention. And lastly, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude and appreciation to the ASEAN Australian Development Cooperation Project Phase 2 or ADCP2 for their generous support to EENC development in ASEAN, and of course ASEAN Secretariat and IEA for being a good partner of ACE and co-hosting this workshop, and of course generosity in preparation and arrangement being made. Thank you very much once again for your kind attention. Stay safe and stay healthy. Back to you, Nela.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nuki. Let's continue with the second keynote address, which will be delivered by Melanie Slade. She is the Senior Program Manager, Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies Program from the International Energy Agency.
Good afternoon, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, our hosts from Brunei, our funders from Australia, and our partners from the ASEAN Secretariat, from ACE, and of course, the expert group on energy efficiency and conservation. A very warm welcome again from the IEA to this very important workshop, which is one of the first opportunities for stakeholder consultation on the roadmaps that we've been developing together. I'm going to start in traditional IEA fashion by a big picture presentation before my colleagues go into details on the cooling and building sectors. So if I could have the next slide, please. And the next one. Thank you. So no IEA presentation is complete without taking a step back and looking at the context for this workshop. And what we're showing here is the work that we have to do collectively to go from where we think emissions are heading, which is the top blue line on here, what's known as the stated policy scenario, and where our global climate change commitments want us to be, which is the green line, the bottom line on this chart here. And clearly there's a huge difference between the two, but about 40% of that is made up of energy efficiency using known, proven technologies. So not waiting for innovation, things we know about that we can do now. So that's the background for what we're talking about today. So energy efficiency has a huge part to play, as our previous speakers have said. Next slide, please. Sadly, unfortunately, energy efficiency improvements have been reducing in recent years. So you may remember when the Sustainable Development Goals were established, there was a requirement for a doubling of the rate of energy productivity as a measure for energy efficiency. And we did manage that for a few years, but unfortunately, that rate of progress has been decreasing and then took a very, very hard hit last year because of the pandemic. So we have even more work to do. And we would estimate that we need to improve not at 2%, but now something like 4% or maybe more in order to make up for the difference. So that's just to set the scene for how important this work is and how timely it is and how we don't have time to wait. So near term is really, really important here. Next slide, please. There are governments are investing as a result of their recovery plans from COVID. And one of the major opportunities that we see is in job creation through sustainable energy, through clean energy transitions. And one of the best ways of creating jobs is to actually invest in energy efficiency, but in buildings in particular. The biggest gains that we see are in buildings, particularly in both new buildings and building retrofit. So that's just to say that if governments can use this opportunity to make improvements in investments, which have been reducing in recent times, and that's what we'd like to stimulate through this these roadmaps. That's one of the purposes of those, to see how we can gain the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. Next slide, please. We're seeing that spending is happening, but it's uneven, and some governments are seeing this opportunity. But one of the main parts of the world that's happening currently is the European Union, and it would be great to see if we can start to stimulate that sort of spending in ASEAN countries as well. So just to be clear, this is money that governments have decided to spend anyway to boost their economies. So it's not looking for new money, but it's focusing it on the opportunities that energy efficiency bring. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing here is the opportunities by different sectors for CO2 reductions, now looking in at buildings in particular. And so you can see that we have basically huge opportunities across the board: residential, non-residential, indirect and direct savings. Next slide, please. Now, what we're looking here, I mentioned earlier that we don't have to wait, and that's absolutely true. We have proven technologies that can do this work for us. So on the left-hand side, if we take cooling, because it's particularly important in this region, although these numbers are global, the yellow bar is showing what we can achieve in terms of CO2 reductions by improving the performance of existing technologies. And you can see that for cooling, that's the largest opportunity we have. And then if we look to the right-hand chart, we can see what we have available to us to reduce emissions reductions through technology maturity. And so in each case, the blue bar here is mature technology. So there are many opportunities using existing technology. And in the cases of heating and cooling in particular, early adoption of known technology that hasn't yet really penetrated markets is another big opportunity to us. And again, the roadmaps can help point to which technologies can give us the biggest benefits most quickly. So that's one of the purposes of doing this work. Next slide, please. Moving to Southeast Asia, what we're looking at is, we refer to this as a waterfall diagram. So basically we're going from where we think things were at in terms of emissions reductions in 2018, where they would go if we carry on with stated policies. That's the 2040 steps bar here. And then how do we get from there to the sustainable development scenario that we were talking about earlier? And equipment efficiency is, of course, a large proportion. Other buildings efficiency is also really important to us here. And then the rest comes from decarbonising the power sector, which, of course, the ASEAN region is doing a huge amount of work on and is progressing extremely strongly on. Next slide, please. So the Roadmap project aims to help address increasing energy demand and emissions reduction, improve collaboration between stakeholders in the region by developing these two roadmaps. And I just want to mention that collaboration, how important that is. We find particularly in the buildings and construction roadmap work that there are many communities that don't traditionally speak to each other. They're not used to being in the same room. They all have their own objectives and they don't necessarily get together on a regular basis. So one of the purposes of this work is to try and bring those communities together. And just to refer to a previous piece of work that ACE worked on with the German government, the ACAP buildings report, that was clear that the communities working on buildings and construction, not only were they not working together within each of the countries, they weren't taking the opportunities to work together across the region. And that's where we see a huge amount of gain being possible, you know, that best practice sharing, learning and developing new ideas together. And likewise, of course, in a much more focused way with the cooling roadmap, the policymakers working with the standards bodies, working with the designers, working with the government officials. So on that basis, we, you know, building on, you know, and recognizing there's a huge amount of work that's been going on in this field for so long. The idea is to make recommendations to make the roadmaps as concrete and actionable as possible. And what we'd like to achieve from today and from subsequent meetings is your input and insights to make this project as useful to the region as possible, as actionable as possible. The idea of the process is to be as inclusive, and this is just one of the first number of opportunities for engagement. And so we'd also like to say, if you know of other stakeholders who should be involved, please do let us know, share contacts, share the links to these presentations after they've happened. And we'd be very happy to incorporate their thinking in this work as well. Next slide, please. So with that, I will finish. Thank you all again. Thanks to partners, collaborators, for a really, you know, collegiate working spirit. And let's hope today is a really constructive building block for this roadmap development. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Ladies and gentlemen, before we come forward and begin our breakout session, I would like to remind you again that in the first session, we will present a snapshot of the role policies and programs can play in supporting sustainable space cooling in ASEAN and explore how finance and innovative business models can help deliver sustainable cooling in the region. This session will be introduced by my colleagues, Michael Upperman. He is the energy analyst from the International Energy Agency. While on the second breakout session, we will present preliminary analysis mapping on the existing status of policies in the ASEAN member states and change over time and seek feedback on gaps and potential data sources. This session will be introduced by Dr. Ian Hamilton from the University College of London. And now I think there would be a button appears on your screen, so you can choose which breakout session you would like to attend. The breakout rooms here is on the bottom side of the platform.
Okay, so thanks so much for joining the buildings breakout session. And I'm joined here with my colleague, Maxine Jordan, who's been coordinating a lot of the development of the roadmap with us. So I'm going to give a brief overview of this session, an overview of the roadmaps, and then also what we're really aimed at in getting out of today's session. We've got a lot of people on board who have great expertise across the region, and this is really just one of the first moments where we begin to draw in that expertise into the construction of the roadmap process. From there, we also have a Mentee Poll, and this is really to illustrate some of the types of questions that we're gaining to get feedback on through a survey that we've designed that we'll be launching just at the end of this session. We'll do a deep dive sessions with panelists, and we've got some really great speakers who are going to come and join and to discuss some of the challenges and some of the opportunities that we face today in developing these strategies going forward, in particular in order to deliver this transition to a low carbon built environment. We'll have a bit of a session on Q&A and feedback from yourselves before going into the final survey launch, and then we'll feed back into the main session. So this workshop really brings together a range of speakers and to kick off our stakeholder engagement in developing the sustainable roadmap for buildings and construction. And this is the first of these engagement events. And in the Asia roadmap, which some of you may be familiar with and others may be coming to this for the first time, the Asia roadmap, which we launched, and I'll show in just a few moments, earlier last year, had over 700 participants across the world contributing into the different regional roadmaps, 200 or so of which coming from Asia. We're really hoping now that in diving down into the ASEAN region, we'll be able to bring a lot more expertise, and you, the participants, get to feed into this process to make this roadmap very much your own. So we'll be conducting further webinars from April through July of this year, with the aim of publishing the roadmap report in late 2021. So this won't be the only opportunity for those of your colleagues that you work with and others that you know within the sector, we really welcome your sharing this activity and for future engagement events that we'll hold. What we'll be doing now is just this brief overview, then we go into a deep dive around new and existing buildings and systems operations, which I'll lead as a panel discussion with colleagues. And then we'll deep dive into materials, urban planning, and resilience and clean energy, which Maxine will lead. And then we'll go into a summary and next steps. So what we'd really like to get a sense of is who is joining us. And for this, we've got a Mentee Poll to kick off and start the process. And what we have here is a QR code. Alternatively, at the top of the screen, if you go to mentee.com and use the code 31747983, you can start putting in where you're coming from. This is the code that will bring you to the survey that we're going to use for the panel discussion as well. So what you'll see, and you can continue to answer the questions as you go through, is a series of questions that relate to new buildings, existing buildings, etc. And that will be really where we're beginning to get the first sense of the context. So hopefully that'll give people enough time to get started. But maybe just in the meantime, I'll see if I can switch over to show if we've got any initial survey results. So hopefully now you can see this. So where we're representing today, people are coming in from a good number from Indonesia, from Singapore, the Philippines, Malaysia, India, Republic of Moldova. Excellent. Cambodia, Australia, wonderful. Myanmar, Brunei. So we'll let this carry on for a little bit longer, but just to give a sense of from the roadmap that we're developing, the opportunity here is for you representing the countries that you work in, the sector that you know in detail, and these roadmaps as they go forward will be able to build with your expertise into the details that we're really trying to get at today. So thanks so much for everybody who's coming in. So the next area that we were interested in knowing is from where, and which sector. So we've got quite a few coming from national government and some from the subnational government, perhaps cities. This would be a really crucial area if any of you are in particular working in the city sector and city level. Many from the civil society, NGO, and academic, which is great. A lot of expertise and knowledge there. Industry associations, financial, and still others who are making their way to different spots on the map. We don't seem to have any from the developer, real estate, or building designer, but I suspect there are some hiding among there. So it'd be really great, again, as we get your expertise as we go forward. So I'll let this carry on, and perhaps we'll revisit again. But in the meantime, I'll go back to the presentation. So if we zoom in terms of Southeast Asia, and Mel gave an illustration of this already in her main presentation, but really the purpose of it is to illustrate and show to you what it is in terms of emissions reductions of the challenge going forward. We know that in delivering what we have to meet in terms of the expected growth across the region, that emissions really can't carry on in how they're being developed, and we need to achieve development and improvements in economic and quality of life throughout, whilst also meeting our obligations in terms of how we minimize the risk to future generation. And this is through emission reduction strategies. And in particular, the built environment offers a lot of opportunity for abatement in terms of emissions through efficiency, through better design, and of course, through decarbonizing through renewable energy. What this provided was an opportunity for us to think about these 8 roadmap themes, and in delivering the future around the built environments of new buildings, how we adapt and improve existing buildings, the systems and operations, the heating, cooling, lighting, ventilation, etc., that all of those buildings will have, and how we can improve upon those going forward. And clean energy, of course, as a major platform for that, and what the role buildings play in this. Urban planning and materials, really critical materials, particularly around how we develop buildings going forward, and the embodied carbon associated with that, and the urban planning and resilience of urban environments to future climate change. So these are the 8 themes that we have developed as a part of the roadmap process, and we use those in constructing the strategies and actions that we have going forward. So this is the regional roadmap for Asia. On the left, you can see the figure of the main cover. And what it does is it sets out a comprehensive framework, really getting to outline what the current status is across Asia as a region overall. And it does contain many examples from ASEAN countries. And this is really where the opportunity from this regional framework provides an opportunity to go into the details for ASEAN and much more in terms of the strategy. So one of the challenges that we highlighted in this roadmap really were the big data gaps, and there were a remaining number of ambition gaps that the sector felt in feeding back. So really for the ASEAN roadmap, what we'd like to be able to do with your help is to differentiate between states, between different member state groups. We'd like to be more specific in terms of which actions and for which context, really understanding how it is that we implement the actions that we're outlining. We'd also like to be able to integrate enabling actions. So this is to better understand how financing, capacity building, skills, trust within different parts of the sector can ensure that we're meeting these targets. And those targets have to be specific, and they allow for measurable actions to be undertaken. So the regional roadmap for Asia will, as we say, we kick off in this initial stage, will set out this broader focus. So this is just an illustration of the 3 areas of urban planning, new buildings and existing buildings, and setting out the current status. And from this regional roadmap, we had recommended actions. And these actions are more detailed in the Asia roadmap, but we're using them as a basis from which to build for the ASEAN region more specific sets of strategies for how to go forward. And so this very first part, which is where we are, is a roadmap to our roadmap, is to validate strategy and strategy elements. to really bring forward all the information that you hold as experts, and for those across the sector in terms of what's being produced and published by research and industry, compile that into different status for each country, to propose and then validate a series of milestones that can be reached for 2025, 2030, and for reaching net zero carbon, and by when. To propose and validate these key actions further, and then compile a set of best practice case studies and examples, because we think it's really important that not only do our strategies have, of course, a good evidence base, but they can illustrate through examples that show best practice, there are many across the region, and we'll be looking for your help here. So finally, this is an outline of the reformulation of the Asean Roadmap in terms of how it will be adapted to the ASEAN context. And for each of these 8 themes, or in this case, 7 shown, we have a focus on building a vision for each one. So for each of these themes, we have a vision, which is the top italicized text. And then from there are a series of action areas. And not meant to be read right now, but I'll give you an illustration with new buildings. So for new buildings, we have a vision. Again, we'll be seeking feedback on this in our survey. The new buildings are designed in such a way that they enable higher levels of thermal comfort and energy efficiency, resulting in comfortable, affordable, and low carbon buildings. And we see 3 key areas of action within this theme. One is to strengthen the adoption and compliance of mandatory building energy codes, a really critical piece. The second is to boost market demand for efficient low carbon buildings. And a third is to boost the capacity in delivering of efficient low carbon buildings. And what we'll be able to do with your help is to be building a more explicit outline around how we are able to do this. So this is how we're proposing that these get built. And what we have is a strategy element. So first, to boost capacity and delivery of efficient low carbon buildings, well, we need to mainstream practice of passive and low carbon design. We need designers, installers who know how to produce and curate buildings. We need to define milestones and dates to serve as indicators for tracking progress. By this date, what should we anticipate should be across the region? How common should these actions be? And what will they comprise? We have timeframes for meeting the net zero carbon. We realize that across the region, it is not going to be that everybody meets the same end date at the same time, or the end goal, pardon me, at the same time. And so there needs to be flexibility for when net zero carbon is being met. And that's really critical to understanding, especially as we dive deeper into the different country level. We want to be able to say these actions can be supported by strategy elements. So who is it that needs to take leadership and responsibility in terms of producing these outcomes, and where are they located within the country setting? And so finally, we want to also be able to say that there are a good example that can be shared across the region within these reportings. And this is really important, as I said before, to illustrate that. Okay, so that was a very brief overview of some of the work that's being developed thus far. And really now we're at an opportunity for bringing in where we're going to go today. So some of the key challenges that we have to address, which is why we have a big question mark here in the box, which is, what are the current building construction practices across the ASEAN member states in terms of the state of the art, the mainstream, and that which can be improved? The second is a policy mapping. Which policies are in place or being developed to address energy efficiency and whole life carbon of buildings? Really, we want to know where there are great success stories around policies and how they can be replicated elsewhere. Which areas need the most support for development? Is it about skills? Is it about education systems? Is it about industry association providing greater access to information? Capacity building is really critical to doing this. It could also be around raising awareness around those who are demanding and purchasing new buildings and designing buildings. Is it financing? We know that, as Mel said, investment in building and construction and energy efficiency is a great economic driver. We also know that the finance and access to be able to build more efficient buildings shouldn't be a barrier for the future, and we need to better understand that. And then also whether or not we have cross-ministerial, horizontal, cross-governmental, vertical coordination being devised to develop and produce these. Data mapping, another key area. Do we know where we can get the information that can be shown to indicate progress going forward? And what milestones could be defined for these different endpoints? So these are the main questions that we're coming to you with, and we'd really appreciate all the input that you can provide to us both today and also with the survey that we launch, and most critically in the future among different webinars and sessions that we hold. So as I mentioned before, we're going to be getting your input in terms of the survey. There'll be audience and panel discussion, which we'll come to in a moment. And of course, the fact that you're joining us today is going to be really critical for us to build a network on which we can rely and build your input. And without further ado, I will then also remind you that we have the Mentee again. And for those of you who've probably already been going through these, to continue to answer, and of course to add your voice to this as well. We really value if you start to write any questions that you might have within the chat. That can be a really helpful way to note some of the key issues during the panel discussion. Okay, maybe just briefly to explain in case anybody hasn't seen it thus far. In the survey, what we've done is we've just taken two questions that exist, within the Mentee poll. We've just taken two questions that exist in the survey, and we've illustrated them not in their entirety. And we wanted to know how common are the following. And here's an example of one of the questions in terms of existing building energy codes or certification standards. And then the second question is, by when could these become more common? And this is where you're meant to give your instance of, this is what you anticipate to be the date by which we could achieve these things as a common practice. And it doesn't need to be, what we really value is for you to give us a realistic sense of this, because this is really where the strategy begins to build. If there's an ambition gap, i.e. people anticipate things won't be delivered as quickly as they might be, it would be really helpful to know that. So that will be enough for me. And I'm really pleased that colleagues can now come to join, and we'll be switching to share screen for those who are joining now, but to do a deep dive in new and existing buildings and systems and operations. So I'm very pleased to be joined today by Jeswin Yoguratham, Head of Policy Reform from Global Buildings Performance Network, Joy Essergai Giazzi, Pacific Programs and Head of Net Zero at the World Green Building Council, and Kim Thua, Senior Expert at GIZ, the Program for Energy Efficiency in Buildings of Vietnam, and also Rio Silatonga, an analyst from the ASEAN Center for Energy, and Ms. Lee Trang, the Vice President of Director General of Daikin Vietnam. So we're very pleased to have you today. So I'm going to go first to Jeswin. And if you'd like to turn on your camera, and that way people can see both you, and I've just put a slide here in case you have something to speak to, and then when you're ready, you can tell me and I'll go to your main slide.
Hi, Ian, thank you, I'm ready.
Okay.
Hi, thank you. So first, I'd like to just begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land from where I'm zooming, which is the Wurundjeri people here, the Kulin Nation in Australia, and I acknowledge elders past and present. I also acknowledge all the organizers and also the sponsors for this event. Thank you for bringing this together. In the context of the question that was put to me, which was, what was the intervention? I think the intervention that GBPN is interested in is very much resonates with what has been put in terms of the roadmap, which is to look at transitionary strategies. So why is transitionary strategies important? Because as what was noted perhaps earlier by Mel Slade, many communities don't speak to each other. So in terms of transitionary strategies, some of these strategies require developing policy platforms that enable some of these communities to come together so they can start speaking together. And why is this important? because as you would know, there are many competing interests in this space in terms of developing, whether it's developing a building code or the process towards developing a regulation in this area. So we need the strength of the multilateral players to come on board a policy platform. So GBPN has, for example, put together a platform called Hidup in Indonesia, which is called Alive. And this platform has enabled a number of multi-sectoral entities from different sectors that are interested in this area to come together as a safe space to discuss how best to develop a regulation, for example. So we are interested, as noted here, from a bottom-up approach, because we believe that we need to actually listen to some of the transitionary processes that need to take place at a local level. And I'm really pleased to see that the roadmap that was put forward has this linkage between national and city, because that's so important. It needs to sort of, national sort of imperatives need to speak to the local context and likewise. And this is important because we need to actually map out the nuances and the differences in terms of the national agenda, but also then how to achieve it at a local level. So for example, in Indonesia, more recently, we need to actually understand what are the local laws and policies and regulations in place. Why is this important? Because again, for example, in Indonesia, they've passed an omnibus law that has enabled the centralization of certain policy development back to national. So that sort of has an impact in terms of how certain regulations perhaps may be developed at a local level. And we call it policy reform as opposed to policy development, because we're actually trying to reform a process that's already in place. And this is an important point. And I think what was noted earlier by Abdul Saman from the ministry in Brunei Darussalam is the prioritizing energy security is not just about prioritizing the need for the building regulation itself, but for the security of those that are involved in it, in that process. So as noted by one of the bigger reformers in terms of BP, Bernard Looney, he talks about performing while transforming. And in that sense, we need to be mindful of the people, we need to be mindful of the communities, we also need to be mindful of those who are investing in this change. And so we take this local stance because we're very interested in creating and reporting a data sharing platform that will inform national in terms of what's happening at the local level, that can also then be replicated and shared by other local entities. We also want to empower independent assessment through coalition of experts at a local level. And this is something we are attempting to do in Indonesia. Sorry, I've just noted an attendee speaking. Is there a question or I'll carry on? Okay, so we're trying to also then empower coalition of experts to really assess the effectiveness of certain pilot projects. And here's where I think the investment into pilot projects is really important in any of the jurisdictions that you're working in, because we are unable to then carry out some of those very important transitionary studies, the baseline studies on the building stock, for example. Because as you have noted earlier, Ian and many others, the data gap is what perhaps is causing some level of uncertainty in terms of where to start or how to start, or what can we achieve in the next 5 years. So without having the data that's relevant towards where we're heading, it'll be very difficult to policy make in this space, and very difficult to sort of to adopt certain types of best practices, because that best practice may not be fit for purpose based on the data that is put before us. So one of the policy reform strategies that we are trying to implement through GBPN is to ensure that we carry out evidence-based and capacity building at that local level, so the data that we collect informs the process. I know I've been given 3 minutes, and I'm just going to pause here for a while to note how much more time I have.
We're probably close to the 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you. I'll end there, and for me, that will enable our data-driven policy making agenda to sort of inform the process towards new building regulations for new buildings in Indonesia and other jurisdictions. Thank you.
That's wonderful. Thank you, Jeswin. I really appreciate your intervention here. And we'll have a chance to pick up on some of the other aspects of what you've described in a moment when we come to the panel session. I'd very like to please Joy from the Net Zero Pacific Program Head at World Green Building Council to speak next. Joy, I don't have a slide per se for you, so I'd be very welcoming for you to present now.
Thank you so much. I like this background. So thank you, Jeswin, as well. So I would like to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, whatever, depends where you're tuning in from. So have a great day. So it's really overwhelmed to see so many of you coming in. So we're close to 100. And there was a time that we hit the 100 mark in our breakout room. So, so today we will have this special conversation. And we're going to do this special conversation about sustainability and energy. So I believe that there's no better time than now, like for us to address this big elephant in the room. So COVID allowed us to realize that there are no borders, no boundaries, no language and culture differences. And yet we're now speaking in the same language to share how nature gave us this gift. And yet taught us that this is the most important lesson, is to take care of our environment. So today, my goal and my interest from the World Green Building Council perspective and also this Joy of Sustainability's perspective is in this advancing of net zero projects and potentials. So because we will start to see a rapid growth of the city in the next 10 years, and that is also one of the reasons that we urgently need to put up the right standard and do things in the best way in the first place. So, well, from the World Green Building Council's perspective, we're already seeing many organizations and groups actually put up their hands to step into the front line and to lead and drive this movement. And it's so great to have the vision and ambition from everyone in the industry. So the next step for us will be following the framework and roadmap to approach this goal together. So a net zero energy ready project usually depends on three main elements, which actually Ian has precisely pointed out in the beginning, like we joined this breakout session. So the first one we're looking at is the government regulations. And the second one we're looking at will be technical readiness. And the last one will be the financial support. I can see Ian knocking heads. Yes, that's exactly what you have shared. And we also have some common enablers to support all the three pillars, like data, like mindset. I think this is what Jeswin was sharing, like is precisely using the data and all these tools and technology to support all this initiative. So most often, actually our attention was, and also our efforts are in the technical readiness, which makes sense because we could manage and we could control. But however, we also hope today we have the opportunity and have the capacity to address all three, to look at what is the government regulations, how does the financial support will help us enable to reach the next level. So I think without further ado, I'm really looking forward to our fun discussion today. And I will hand over back to Ian, please.
Thank you so much, Joy. Really appreciate that. And really great to hear about the programming that we've be coming forward, especially as the World Green Building Council, really critical partner, and with the affiliations it has around the world and working with the local building councils, to coordinate and to share best practices is really, really key. So thank you so much, and we'll be looking forward to your statements in the panel discussion as well. So I'd also like to now invite Kim Tua to join, and I believe you're also here on board now. And who is a senior expert at GIZ and the Program for Energy Efficiency in Buildings, PEEB. So Kim, if you'd like to turn your camera on, and we'll be able to kick off from there. Hello.
Okay, I need to unmute it. Okay. Hello. Yeah. I'm very happy to be here with you and seeing so many of you from different organizations joined together in the talk and in this event to promote for sustainable and low carbon building. Yeah, now I would like to share with you that we also do a few starting work in Vietnam to promote for well, we start from very modest sense of energy efficient building. As you know, that I presenting for program for energy efficiency in buildings in Vietnam. This is a global project doing in a few 5 countries, but Vietnam is for Asia, so it's right at our session here is for Southeast Asia. And actually the work had been started quite a few years ago with the government of Vietnam, but now with more attention from international context. And as you already mentioned, that we really following and taking advantage that the global ABC, a global alliance for building and construction already developed the methodology for the roadmap. And we had the chance to introduce those methodology to Vietnamese government through the Ministry of Construction. However, we can see that from the government, the roadmap for national, for NDC is developed a little bit like a top-down approach. So the Ministry of Ministry of Natural Resource and Environment is coordinating the whole country efforts to make sure that the commitment by Vietnam through the implementation of Paris Agreement can be harmonized by every economic sector. And then we under this program for energy efficiency in building, helping the Ministry of Construction to make sure that the construction sector from Vietnam will contribute their part in the government effort to achieve the NDC of Vietnam. So far, it committed 9% reduction compared to the baseline. And from this, we in the last 2 years, we already joining hand with all of the experts and Ministry of Construction exploring the methodology and go into the detail with new construction, existing building, materials and resilient and new energy. All of those, the 8th sector of the roadmap is the routine, and then we also go through the survey with the local expert, and then listening to international feedback as well through the platform of the program of energy efficiency in building and the platform from the global ABC. So far, we have completed the first draft of the roadmap to be further submitted to the government Ministry of Construction for consultation, and then listen to see that how far the Ministry of Construction would like to bring it in to fit into the whole overall framework for the entire economy, because we're presenting only one sector. So I don't know, with a few minutes we can present something, but we really started with some first step and facing a few challenges, as some of your earlier speaker already mentioned. The biggest challenge is on the data. A few areas we do not have existing data. For example, the benchmark for energy efficient building does not yet exist. We just do a few baseline study in the last 5 years with the different support from UNDP, USAID, or GIZ, and now from the PIP, and then try to get the baseline and compare and seeing how we perform today compared to 5 years ago in 2015, and try to set up the roadmap as the government could buy in, and then we can have something endorsement by the government within 1 or 2 years.
Wonderful. Well, we'll look forward very much to seeing more of the Vietnam roadmap in the future, and actually to bring that effort that you're helping with and coordinating into this ASEAN. I'm sure there'll be some really great best practice that can be shared across that. Thank you, Ms. Kim. I know we'll speak with you again later on as well in the second session of this. So thanks so much. And I'd really like to now invite Ms. Lee Trang to come and turn on a video, and we'll hear, oh, pardon me, I've missed with Rio. Our second to last, but not least, Mr. Rio Silatonga from ASEAN Center for Energy, and we'll invite you to speak now for three minutes or so, and I know you have a slide. So when you're ready, please turn on your camera and we'll go to your slide and we'll hear your intervention. Before we apologize, but go then to Ms. Lee Trang to present on her last. So Rio, when you're ready.
Okay. Thank you, for your kind introduction. Would you mind to share my one single? Okay, that's on. All right. First of all, thank you, Ian, and also to the previous speakers. I just want to share with you all what actually the current progress and also the best practices in building in the region. I think it was noted by Dr. Nuke this morning, at the beginning of this workshop, that disaggregated by sectors, building, including commercial and residential sectors, is the third largest in terms of energy demand in ASEAN regions. And it is expected to see the highest growth in the building sectors if then the energy efficiency measures is not ambitiously done in the future. Just want to acknowledge the concept of the development process, taking into note that there are 8 themes will be taken into account for this roadmap process, including urban planning, new building, existing building, and so on and so on. And so forth. I think that's a indeed very comprehensive element for roadmap. But agree that we have to see what actually the local and also the more speciality related to the situation and also conditions of ASEAN in the region for the process of roadmap development. And we noted also some themes and also priority actions to be put in terms of policy and technology and enabling activities include capacity building and finance. So this is aligned actually with our activity related to promotion of the zero energy building concept in the region. We actually we have been trying to promote the zero energy building in the ASEAN regions through some activities, including awarding and also some exchange of information to raise the awareness and also knowledge of the policymakers and market in terms of ZAB. But not limited to GAB, we also is also this is implementing some activity related to building, such as training and also some policy and also some research. But in this occasion, I just want to share with you, particular on the net zero building. We try to consult the ASEAN stakeholders and also the market how actually the base approach, that we can really step by step introduce and implement zero energy building. So this is, you can see in the slide, we conduct some preliminary consultations with the stakeholders, including policymakers and market, and agree the challenge exists. I think similar with the earlier speaker mentioned, mostly on the capacity, institutional capacity, and also financial burden to adopt the, especially for the initial cost, and also technical burden, especially for the affordable combination of the passive design and also active design in the building. That is why we come up with some approach in order we can really introduce a step-by-step approach to introduce a net zero building through capacity building, policy formulations, including how we can facilitate market transformations. For activity related to promotions, we also included the GEB criteria under the ASEAN Energy Award. So for your information, the ASEAN Energy Award is the award for energy efficiency, which was started in 2000, and the inclusion of the GEB has been started in 2019 as the concrete way of promotion of zero energy building in the ASEAN regions. So the aims of the inclusion of the GEB in the award, we've seen that this is important to accelerate the movement of GEB. and come up with the criteria to see the readiness of the buildings for achieving the energy saving under the criteria of GIB. So yeah, pretty much looking forward to discuss with other experts here and how we can actually promote an intervention to the concept roadmap from IEA.
Thank you very much, Rio. That's really, really exciting to hear. And I'm sure that with the ASEAN Energy Awards in the Zero Energy Building category, it's going to be really great to get some fantastic examples from. So thank you very much for your intervention, and we'll bring you back shortly after Ms. Lee Trang has an opportunity to also speak now. And thank you very much. And so I'll welcome Ms. Lee Trang to present and to speak. And I know you have a slide as well, which I'll go to. So thank you so much, and I'll hand over to you.
Hello, my name is Phương Trang. I am the Vice President of the Vietnam Refrigeration and Air Conditioning Association. Also, we also GD of the Air Conditioning Vietnam. Good afternoon, everybody. Today, I want to share the one case study in Vietnam about the national chain store. I know, like Ms. Hoa already shared with you, in Vietnam, we just like a star of the research and study about the sustainable building. Therefore, we don't have the, up to now, we don't have the exactly the system and we cannot share with you about the operation. I hope in next time, but we will deploy the system, how the easy for the operator and easy for the control, the energy. Okay, first of all, we want to share with you about the case study in the Vietnam national chain store. As you know, energy consumption is a growing concern in ASEAN member states. To shut down the system and stop operation will impact the economic growth due to the reduced the level of the business activity. Luckily, recent advancement in the computer and technology provide us with a better option. That is the adoption of the smart efficiency system and control. Take case of the Vietnam, where national chain store is gaining popular. Owners are concerned of the controlling energy expenses while maintaining the comfort for their working customer. Smart control system have to involve to allow multi-site centralized control. From the headquarters, master control device will receive the data from and send order to control device at individual site through the Wi-Fi router and internet environment. Energy consumption of the HVAC system can be monitored at each facility by a built-in wattmeter inside the BC board of the outdoor unit. Consumption data is stored at the cloud server of manufacturer. Our solution for the national chain store aims to increase user awareness of their consumption pattern. At the individual site level, store owner can read energy report for their store and become proactive in energy saving behavior. We have the run demonstration on one national chain with the 1,000 store. We first established the consumption pattern of the current operation. Based on the study of the actual usage, we suggested 2 times for operation optimization. For each adjustment, we increase setting temperature by 2 degrees Celsius. Results show that energy reduction is 11.6% at the first optimized and 40.6% at the second optimized. Initial invest in the control system of saving amount on the electricity bill after the 3.5 months of the adoption. At the headquarter level, we provide the business management with the overall picture of energy consumption nationwide. Inefficiency operation can be identified through detailed breakdown and comparison between the sides, while effect of the energy saving at the one store can be minimized. Accumulated saving of the chain store nationwide is a well-worth to consider for the business and society. Thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much. This is really exciting to see what we know to be really important tool around achieving efficiency, in particular around digital solutions integrated with more efficient systems. So it's really great to see the work that you and at Daikin have been leading on in Vietnam. So thank you so much for that. And now what we'll do is we will go to what everybody else has been helping us on, along with the experience that you've provided to us today. And that is the different findings that we've had from the group. So hopefully everybody can see this, and I know that you've all been filling in the survey and listening to the speakers at the same time. I just wanted to bring back each of the speakers now. So if Joy and Kim and Rio and Lee, you'd like to turn your videos on, and what we'll invite you to do is as we quickly go through these slides, because we've got quite a lot of material to cover, if you wanted to say just a few words in the final statement as we move through them, and in particular for your areas of interest. So what I'm going to try and do, if I can manage to get both up on the same time, is that we have, in terms of existing capacity or existing area, how many of the following are common? So looking at new buildings, passive designs of building codes and well-enforced building codes, and building passports and the like. So this is, maybe we're not so common for some of these, and it'd be interesting as we move through just briefly, where it is that you think we could become more common in these settings, and what's the key thing that you think would be needed to support that. So perhaps Joy, I might call on you to give your first response, but particularly for new buildings or existing buildings next. But what do you think, in seeing these results and seeing how, by when we might be able to achieve these, what's the key thing that you think would be really important for new buildings to take action on to achieve this net zero setting?
Thank you, Ian. I think the most pleasing thing for this chart I'm seeing is this building energy code is the so-called highest rating at this moment. So this also shows that many government initiatives, because sustainability or net zero, it's definitely a lot of top-down initiative. A lot of people won't like to agree, but certainly we need this top-down approach to drive the change and agenda. So that's why building energy code have the most common one, which definitely is the best trend for now. So I'm also seeing that the net zero energy building standard seems like the longest to achieve for the new building. And that's also represents like the industry also have this kind of big challenge and filling the gap before they really achieve the best of the class. So that makes sense, which actually also shows that the participants are very authentic in filling the response. And then there's another thing this is getting longer and longer, just now that it was changing. So there's also another thing I would like to emphasize, because coming with the building energy code, the well-enforced building energy code that comes together. So I think that also shows the best way. So optimize the passive design is another thing I wanted to highlight also, because that's always is the first step we want to bring the energy down. So we want to really make use of the nature as a gift that really open everything. Because when we talk about passive design, actually there are two words pop up from that passive design. So the first thing is to receive. because you're receiving the gifts from the nature and you also want to receive whatever already there that you don't need to create again. So after the receive, the next word it pop up is accept. Because we actually use air conditioning system to show that we don't accept such a gift. We use the lighting system shows that we're rejecting the natural light. I think with the receive and accept, it also brings the passive design into this full integration with our building. So that's where we would like to emphasize how passive design and optimized passive design is important and is well deserved to be the top on the list. I would like to address a little bit of finance as well, but I think there are also some experts who wants to really bring more of these comments in, but I will just leave it there for now. I think finance is also another potential we can bring, we can drive this further. Yeah,
thanks so much, Joy. Appreciate that. Jesmyn, I apologize. We missed inviting you back on for the beginning, but actually perhaps I might put you on the spot now, and maybe if you could also reflect on, in particular, new buildings, what you think the key actions are really needed here based on what you're seeing in terms of how people are inputting on what needs to be the focus in going forward and achieving, for a net zero buildings across the region.
Yeah, thanks, Ian. And I'm not surprised that building energy codes seem to come out as the top performer here, only because you've got to think of it from a very practical point of view. If you do not have the building energy code, whether it's national or local government, sorry, is that one of the items there? So maybe I'm not looking at the graphs correctly, but I would say building energy codes only because from a very practical perspective, in order for example, a local government to move forward with a project, they need to sort of adhere to a particular standard, which is actually provided by a building energy code. But that building energy code needs to come through a regulation, a building that's put in place to enable that government, for example, to put out tenders for purposes of building a whole residential project in accordance to those codes. So if those codes are not in place, it is very unlikely that it's going to catalyze the situation, because remember, and this is also from experience from other jurisdictions, not just Indonesia, local authority, for example, is going to be very slow to take on a high ambition energy code project, for example, if it is not in place in terms of an energy code through a regulation, right? So the building energy codes are important, but I think what I'd like to put my caveat there is that it needs to be in the form of a regulation in order for it to suit. And that will be the catalyst towards the change where you get your optimized passive design, where you get your financial incentives all coming together. But the code has to bring, the code is, in my opinion, the glue that brings it all together.
Thank you very much, Jesmyn. And absolutely, the idea of well-enforced building codes, you have to have that enforcement side, you have to have that pull and push at the same time. So thanks so much. And we'll go to the next findings, which were focused on existing building. Oh, pardon me. There we go. And one more here. Trying a two-part panel, it's a bit challenging. So very similar sets of questions, and perhaps Rio, if I might invite you to reflect first. I know you're just seeing these for the first time, but really in terms of the actions that are needed, and then really from the ACE perspective, what would be supporting for existing buildings around how we can transition those towards net zero going forward, and whether or not you see perhaps also in the work that you've helped coordinate, in what aspects of by when and different tools or standards and certifications can help to incentivize that.
Yeah, thank you, Ian. Yeah, I think before that, to the certification, just want to re-emphasize again. I think I do agree with the previous speakers that reinforce building code. I think this is something that is expected to come up in the near future, because if you see the context of the ASEAN's initial planning, initial implementations of building code has been implemented in some ASEAN countries. So it's the matter of how we enhance the enforcement of the building code to get the impact of the code. In terms of the measures in ASEAN, we agree to optimize the operationalizations of the building systematic way is very important. That's why energy management for building and also some standard and also labeling for the building is a very effective way to encourage the market to implement and also to achieving the energy savings in the buildings. Yes, but as I mentioned, towards net zero building, according to our initial preliminary overview study, we have seen the challenge still exists, still around the capacity, the financial burden. Sometimes building very hesitant to implement the buildings due to the especially the initial cost of the technology, and also some the technical issues as well, and how the combination of passive design and active design for building for the building practice owner. Certificate is very important in order not just only to ensure the building can achieve for the energy saving, but also this is some of recognitions as well. In ASEAN, we actually have conducted in several, have conducted what we call it ASEAN Gold Energy Management System. So this is equal to the ISO 51000 for energy management, and we put the label as ASEAN with a three-star system. The market very, I think this is one of optional certificate to give recognitions of what efforts has been implemented by building, and they are feeling encouraged to achieve the energy savings for the recognition as well. In our opinion, certifications and labeling for building is something that we are looking to expand, to enhance in the future in ASEAN.
Great. Yeah. Thank you very much, Rio. Appreciate that. And Ms. Kim, I'll also ask you just any reflections for in terms of what's been developed thus far in the Vietnam roadmap. Just briefly, again, kind of from the existing building perspective, what you see as being the key to achieving net zero. I think you might be muted. Apologies.
Sorry, for Vietnamese case, you really asking me touches on the most difficult point in Vietnam, because our energy building code is applied to the new building. Okay, existing building is the second later, because it really crucial and difficult, especially the most difficult part of the every municipal government is the existing residential multifamily buildings. It's very difficult to touch on that, not because of the building itself, but because of urban planning issue related to that. How we can really moving and really planning the city in a way that we have space to do anything. Now, when the high populated area is there, even any new single idea cannot be applied because it's just too crowded. So existing building, especially in the high density urban areas, is nearly untouchable point. So far, the situation in Vietnam is in the difficult city like Hanoi or Ho Chi Minh with 10 or more than 10 million population. The existing building, especially residential multifamily buildings, is really difficult to renovate it, even to keep it in safety, rather than talking about energy. So we're talking really the hardest point in our plan. Yeah. However, even yesterday morning, we already hear in our television in Vietnam that the two municipality government of Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City now really speak out to the whole population, to the whole citizen, that how we are going to do with existing building, and then slowly introducing not only safety in terms of structural structure, but also in terms of energy efficiency and sustainable, and then better comfortability. Yes. And but the challenge also presenting our opportunity that when the city government saying that now we are going to touch it on existing residential multifamily building, that is where we can really introducing right away the concept of energy, of low carbon, and of even net zero if they really turn from one part to the other. So we see that existing building is a challenge, but also opportunity if we really can try to touch it on the whole building stock of the city or of the nation. So for that reason, we seeing here the in the charts here that to achieve that it really touchy on the not only the compliance to the code, but also the financing instruments to make it happen. And it needs to be go in line with urban planning so that we can achieve something that we plan to.
Right. Thank you very much, Ms. Kim. I think it's incredibly important what you're explaining about Vietnam and its existing building stock, and how the focus needs to be two-part, obviously, focusing on safety and improvement of structural integrity and the like, and then also at the same time addressing how it can be improved to achieve comfort and efficiency. I did note, Jeswin, your hand had come up. Perhaps I could very briefly invite, and then we'll move to Ms. Lee Trang to present on the last, or give her intervention statement on the last system and operations. So Jeswin, did you want to make a statement here?
Just quickly, and thank you, Kim, for that. I think you've raised a really, really important point, that in the context of what we're trying to do in this area, we need to actually take into context that core benefits approach, because the issue of health, the issue of safety that you just mentioned earlier, are some of the challenges we have in terms of existing buildings. But the core benefits approach could also be one that we look into in order to provide that opportunity for those new buildings to be developed in the context of taking into consideration those very, very fundamental important points, and also from that rights approach. So thanks for raising that, Kim. I think in many ASEAN countries, that is something we need to rethink. It's not just about the carbon abatement, but also about those other issues that can lead towards the carbon abatement goals being achieved. That's the point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jeswin. And take the opportunity now to move to systems and operations. I've just put these slides out there, and Ms. Lee, I know that we're just seeing these for the first time, so I'll take a second you can reflect on, but be very interested, especially from your perspective and your expertise area around systems in particular, and their operation around achieving high performance standards can be embedded. What you see as being the key actions in this systems and operations setting to achieve a shift towards net zero, and just based on what we see here as well, what the audience is anticipating. This is something which I reflect on very briefly within the ASEAN party with the Asia Roadmap, which is the ambition for adoption of technology is very high. There's a real interest to bring these things into their system achievement. So I do see that being reflected here as well. They may not be very common yet, but there's a real ambition towards them. I just wanted to see what your reflections were there.
Okay, you already see that if the system very good system, but the behavior or the manner of the user or operator, if not, they cannot recognize about the energy efficiency. Even the system would cannot have to optimize the results. Therefore, I think the first we have to how we educate the owner, educate the user about the energy saving. First, not only the finance, but I need to the government also. Many associations, many associations, even the Ministry of the Construction, Ministry of the Trade and Energy also have to support us for the educate communication with the user. and give them more the incentive. If that we can easy for adopt. I also in the Daikin Vietnam, we also have to plan to build one building in the Ho Chi Minh City. About we also would like to become the zero energy building. First of all, cannot zero, but we have to slow energy building. But very complicated because standard in the Vietnam now not so much. Very complicated up to now. After 2 years, I still continue now. Still have to persuade the government. Many. Therefore, Mr. Thoa, please help me for the like a bridge with the government, how to support the owner and also communicate public broadcasting more and more for the owner, the user. They have to recognize about energy efficiency. I think this one is the best. Of course, when we have the demand, manufacturer, we have the according the system for the based on the demand. That's all.
Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. I've really appreciated all of your input and your expertise and being able to help develop what I think has been a really interesting panel discussion on the results of what we've had now over 40 or so responses from everybody involved in terms of this different first session. So I really thank you very much, Joy, Rio, Kim, Lee, and Jeswin for your interventions today, and I really appreciate the time, and we'll look forward to continue to connect with you on this set of topics. So without further ado, well, for lack of a round of applause, which I would hope everybody can give, we'd also now invite Maxine as well to join for the next session, and we'll carry on from here. And I appreciate everybody's staying on and carrying on with us. So thank you so much, and I really appreciate your input.
Thank you very much, Ian, and thank you to all of our speakers. That was really interesting. And now we're happy to move on to the next part of the session, where we'll follow a similar format, and we'll be talking about materials, urban planning and resilience, and clean energy. So we have about 45 minutes left in our breakout session. So we'll try and stick to the time. So if you go to the next slide, please, Ian. We have another set of great speakers, and we have Ms. Kim Thoa joining us again, who's to talk about materials, because this, your experience with the Vietnam roadmap following the same sort of methodology is really interesting to us and to the audience. Then we have Mr. Brendan Coleman from the OECD Green Finance and Investment Center. Then we have Mr. Brian Dean, who is the head of energy efficiency and cooling at Sustainable Energy for All. And then finally, Ian Hamilton, who you've just seen, will talk a little bit about clean energy. So we'll move straight ahead. And Kim Thoa, please put your camera back on and join us again. And it'd be great to hear some of your findings on your work on materials, because we know that this is a challenging area. And yeah, it'd be great to hear how you've been getting on in the development of the Vietnam roadmap.
Okay, hi everybody. Actually, I worked quite about 10-12 years with Vietnam Ministry of Construction Research Institute on Building Materials. And then in the past 20-30 years, we only focus on how good the material could be bring into the construction sector, all type of the property, but never talk about energy performance property in the building materials. That is a new thing that the first thing we need to retrain all of our researchers on what is a thermal property, what is a thermal breaches, or what does it mean thermal performance of a wall. So the thing is never touched by the building material engineer in the past. Nowadays we have to put into two areas of work, energy and building material in one, and then the embodied energy now concept, it need to be bring in two. Then even we have to modernize our laboratory and then retrain our researcher. And then also one more important thing is what is the standard for thermal performance of the building material. Is there already existing in our country yet? And we find out, no, we do not have it. We have the strength, compressive strength, and all type of strength of the material, but not the thermal property of that. So very luckily in the last 5 years with our UNDP project, who helping the Ministry of Construction, we already developed a few technical standard like a thermal performance of the wall, thermal breeze of the window, and all of those thermal properties, so that the building material need to be the manufacturer need to be pay attention to make sure that it achieves in terms of energy performance of the building, so that later on we can calculate energy, embodied energy of the building materials that we make use to build up the building. So that is the few starting points that we did in the last 5 years. And then we now involving not only the energy expert, but also building material engineer and researcher into the work to bring in energy efficient, low carbon, and the net zero energy building. And so that we can see that every piece of brick, every kilogram of cement that we producing now, exporting now, need to have a less embodied carbon, so that we can allow less footprint in every square meter of buildings that we build up. So that is what we are doing now, focus on working with the manufacturer, but also researcher, and linking with the existing residential building program, green building program as well. Not from the only passive design, not only from the architect, but also not only with the operational and engineer, but also building material engineer who are making every piece of brick and every ton of cement now. That is in brief our working, but if you have question, I will be happy to answer.
Perfect, thank you so much. And I think we can come back to some of those points when we have a look at the Mentee Poll results again. So thank you very much. Now, I'd like to move on to Brendan from the OECD, who's going to talk to us a little bit about urban planning and resilience and his experience with that. So Brendan, please, the floor is yours. Welcome. You're on mute.
Sorry about that. You'd have thought I'd be used to that by now. Anyway, thank you, Maxine, and thank you to all the participants, and thank you for allowing me the chance to speak. So as I said, I wanted to provide some comments and around the sort of theme of the climate resilience and urban planning. But maybe before that, I will sort of explain and introduce some of the work that the OECD is doing under the Clean Energy Finance and Investment Mobilization Program, which we call CEFIM. This is the program that I'm currently working with, where I'm coordinating the Vietnam activities. So the CEFIM program is supporting large emerging economies to sort of put in place the enabling frameworks, policy frameworks to scale up investment in clean energy. That's both renewable energy and also energy efficiency for buildings and in the industrial sector. So currently we're working in ASEAN countries, Thailand, Indonesia and Vietnam, where we're in Indonesia and Vietnam, we're the most advanced, where we're currently undertaking clean energy finance and investment policy reviews, which really goes beyond just a kind of pure energy policy lens to look at the full integrated set of policy areas, which together form the investment and finance environment for clean energy. So it looks at issues of governance and planning. It looks at regulatory frameworks, issues under FDI and investment facilitation, and also in financial market policy. So we'll be actually publishing our first CEFI review for Indonesia over the next month or two, and for Vietnam before the end of the year. So I would sort of encourage participants to look out for those two publications, which will hopefully hope to draw into a lot of this road mapping discussion for the energy efficiency in building sector. In the areas of urban resilience and planning, so it's clear that cities are, and the populations of cities will be bearing the brunt of increasing climate impacts over the years, particularly those with fragile sort of systems and large and sort of economically marginalized populations, which often bear the most impacts from climate extreme weather events. So these are happening now. Climate impacts are happening now. C40 has reported that 70% of cities are already dealing with the effects of climate change. We see that 90% of urban areas lay in coastal zones, which puts most cities on Earth at the risk of extreme storms and rising sea levels. So when we're discussing roadmaps, to sort of deliver low carbon resilient urban environments, we need to also integrate in issues of adaptation. And achieving resilient outcomes requires planning processes that shape advanced action. And they need to be iterative, inclusive, and integrated. And we can talk about a few guiding principles very quickly. So planning processes need to be inclusive and consultative. They need to be people-centric and engage with multiple stakeholders. We also need to think of having systems thinking going onto holistic approach, analyzing urban environments as living systems with interrelated processes and subsystems. And also we need to combine hard and soft measures. So not just investment in hard infrastructure, physical infrastructure and retrofitting. We also need to ensure that the capacity of stakeholders, development of networks, awareness raising and shaping behaviors is also integrated into planning processes. We also need to see that we have an embracing technological advances, while also not ignoring low-tech, cost-effective solutions, as we've already heard. Passive design, increased vegetative cover, all help to build resilient cities. So I think that's probably about 3 minutes. So I will pass back to Maxine. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. And there are a lot of hooks in what you've said that I think will come out in the discussion in the polls, particularly around how to achieve these planning processes following the principles that you mentioned: inclusive, integrated, multi-stakeholders, all of that. So be really interested in maybe coming back to that and talking about the how to actually make this happen. Thank you very much. And now next we move on to Brian Dean from Sustainable Energy for All. So you have a slide. Are you ready for us to move on to your slide?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Great, thank you. Welcome, and the floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. Hello, everyone. So, my perspective on sort of urban planning is I see it really as the glue for integration between the building sector and mobility sector and energy sector, and really, as Brendan was saying, it also enables some of the resilience that goes on as well with if you can get passive measures in place, such as cool roofs or urban planning of trees, nature-based solutions. that also helps with the resilience. So I like that the urban planning and resilience are sort of together in this discussion. We at SC4All, we developed a report last year called Switching Gears, which is very much about mobility and the transport sector. But many of the analysis approach in it, I think, is very relevant to this conversation in that analysis, the approach was to look at prioritizing cities and identifying solutions for those cities. And you know, one of the things that we did from a planning perspective is we looked at what are the fastest growing second tier cities. So we often talk about the mega cities, but it's incredibly important from an urban planning perspective to look at those, either those cities that are growing rapidly or potentially new cities, like a new capital city for Indonesia. Those are the types of cities that can really benefit dramatically from good urban planning. And there's data available that can help you look at and identify what second tier cities are growing fast and opportunities to improve their planning. Now, with urban planning, transit-oriented development, of course, is really critical from an entire energy perspective. And if you're able to identify where your energy resources are, particularly sustainable energy, whether that's solar panels, as you can see behind my head with our Be Bold campaign, or wind or other forms of renewable energy, where are those sources of energy and how can they be used most effectively within an urban environment? Of course, density of buildings really help in your ability to have both transit-oriented development, but also using local resources of energy within a small compact area. So I think urban planning really needs to address that. From a little bit more on the resilience side, at SC4All, we really believe in looking at vulnerable populations, and you know, the leave no one behind is certainly a motto that we use, and resilience is an important aspect of that. So not just resilience as a strong building during an earthquake, but is it a resilient building that can actually provide the services that we need during a power outage, during a heat wave? And those types of resilience measures are really important. How can we use solar panels for shading? Whether that's for parking a vehicle or potentially a bus stop to shade people while they're waiting for transit. All of this relates, of course, to the density of the buildings as well. And in our work with the Cool Coalition, there's a nice sort of 5-step approach that is protect those vulnerable populations, reduce, shift, and improve, which is quite commonly known, and then leverage, work together as partners. Some of the partners that we're working with, digging in on these different urban planning type issues, Zero Carbon Buildings for All through the World Resources Institute. I think it's really important to look at their work, which is really much more about this integrated approach. And then in terms of stepping into the interaction with transit, the Sustainable Mobility for All through the World Bank, I think is another interesting project. And of course, our Cooling for All program is looking very closely at the cooling issues and how we can bring solutions to everybody. And that's, you know, what you can see on this slide. We have a campaign called This is Cool. And this particular slide is looking at what happens in an urban planning perspective when you add nature-based solutions like trees and you add solar panels, and you know, you look at reducing the urban heat island impact. So certainly encourage you to join the conversation. You know, look for hashtag This is Cool in social media and go to thisiscool.sc4all.org for more information. So with that, back over to you, Maxine.
Thanks so much, Brian. And we'll be able to come back to some of these topics in the discussion as well. But I think the This is Cool with the images are really striking. And I think they do a really good job at raising awareness around how things like vegetation actually would affect temperatures of people walking down the street. And so I think they do a really good job of illustrating that. So yeah, really well done. Really like that campaign.
Great, thanks.
So thank you. And so now we'll move on to Ian Hamilton, who's going to be talking to us about clean energy and how we are looking at clean energy in the context of this buildings roadmap. So Ian, go ahead.
Thanks a lot, Maxine. So within the roadmaps, clean energy has to encompass a couple of different areas. There's obviously going to be fuel switching as a part of the shift towards more clean fuels being used, and clean energy as a part of that strategy needs to support that shift. That, of course, has implications not only within the building in terms of energy systems, but of course upstream as well, when looking at that shift from fuels towards a clean fuel such as electricity in terms of clean emissions at the point of use, the implications upstream for renewables overall as the shift towards lowering emissions. And this is a real challenge that needs to be taken forward within the ASEAN region, in particular around the investment towards making better use, or making, pardon me, more use of the available resources there in terms of solar PV, wind, and other renewables that are available across the region. But for buildings in particular, the challenge will be in better integrating renewables as a part of the existing infrastructure, part of the existing built environment, as well as new developments that can have an opportunity to build renewables in from the beginning. So the on-site renewable resources, as it were, for a new development can be tackled in a different way than existing, where you have a lot more interacting with the urban environment and other buildings as a part of that. So alongside fuel switching, when looking at building integrated renewables, really key part of the strategy within the roadmaps is considering how on-site access to support different systems such as photovoltaics, solar thermal, and in some settings it may be that some other are more appropriate as well. Very, clean biofuels is another option. They have to be really connected to the services being used. So for lighting, for air conditioning, for cooking in particular, it's really key to be able to match the system and the fuel sources as a part of the renewable strategy. And so for building integrated renewables, being able to access roof spaces, there's a lot of really important steps around how buildings can be designed and support the integration. They also have to have upgraded electricity systems as a part of that as well. So these can't be forgotten as a part of the shift. And the key among that is when we're looking also at some which are perhaps a lower priority, but solar thermal for hot water purposes is really key towards, say, for example, making in multi-unit residential buildings where roof space is limited for some use types, but they can be built into what is actually quite a high energy demand around hot water, and where you typically might have water services that can be supported through that. So another area that as part of the building integration really is what digital systems can provide for as well. And so in supporting a shift towards clean and being able to make use of the integration of what new systems might be a part of both existing and new buildings in terms of renewables, is connecting them to the variability that service demand has. So as we've heard from Brian and from others and from Mel within the opener, is that cooling demand is going to be a consistent growth area going forward, in which case how we can better make use of, say, digital systems as a part of being able to adopt clean fuels into where we're using for example, air conditioning systems for lighting, reducing heat gains through, for example, solar shading that is better automated. So digitalization is one of the key strategies, as well as it works upstream as well in terms of being able to better manage what renewables in a variable system, within a power system can better adapt to. So flexibility is really key as well. So building integrated renewable systems, of course, are going to have the kit, the wires, and they have to be smart enough to know how to be able to deploy different power at the same time. So we also have storage is another key area, and storage on site is again going to be a really important part of the story for renewable deployment for building scale. When you have either, for example, on-site PV production, and in a smaller building where you may not be able to use all of it as it's generated, you can make use of storage. Storage is incredibly expensive, and it's one of the things which going forward, if things change and they continue to drop in terms of pricing, storage is one part of the story, but also so is, as I said, the ability to send power back into the grid. And that means that in addition to digital is also having the infrastructure in terms of the regulatory requirements, allowing for buildings that are power producers, net positive, to be able to send energy back in to the grid. And it may not be a very expanded grid. It could just be among a set of buildings very adjacent to it, but having some form of power sharing is really critical to supporting their adoption and making the business case more economically sustainable. So Maxine, I probably won't dwell too long because I note that we want to get to a discussion period as well. But just to say that the roadmaps are picking up on the integration side, not so much from a large infrastructure setting, but rather how buildings themselves are a part of that solution towards clean energy.
Great, thank you so much, Ian. So now we go back onto our discussion session and continue looking at the results from the audience polling on the themes that we've explored. So we appreciate there are a lot of themes that we're addressing with this roadmap, 8 themes, but it's, you know, as we've seen, all of them are critical to decarbonizing buildings over the whole life cycle. So if we come back to materials, it's the first time I'm seeing the results as well. So let's have a look at the, try and read the slides together. But it looks like...
And if we can invite Brendan and Brian and Kim to please turn your videos back on, we'll have the panel.
Yeah, thanks. So it looks like in terms of disclosure and data and sort of criteria for assessing what is low embodied carbon, those things seems to be quite uncommon across the region, and it's something that we recognize is mostly due to the challenge in data, and as we heard from Kim, even the thermal performance of building materials is only starting to be used and assessed and tested. So we recognize that embodied carbon is going to be even more challenging. So it's an even newer area. But it's encouraging to see that designers and manufacturer capacity is actually quite high. So that's really good to know. And so it'd be great to understand, Kim, whether you have any thoughts on this, and what do you think the stepping stones are to be able to get more data on embodied carbon? And I think here what's going to be key is a sort of incremental approach to being able to assess whether a building design is going to end up with a higher or lower embodied carbon, and what are the tools needed, and what is the data required for designers to be able to assess whether a particular solution is higher or lower embodied carbon, and whether these rules can also be used eventually in public procurement. So if you have any thoughts, we'd be really glad to hear them about what sort of approaches could support improvement in this area.
Yeah, I think that, okay, I think this area that we can see the regulatory, I mean, from Vietnam case, the Ministry of Construction do have the separate department for building material development, and then they are doing a good job. During the last 5 years, the government already tried to get the baseline of CO2 emission from every building material production process, for brick, for cement, for glass, building glass, and for lime. We use also lime from limestone, and roofing materials, masonry material, all of those that we have to see that in order to see the embodied energy, where it come from, energy related technological process, or from the raw material itself. For example, CO2 really directly emitted from, not emitted, but released from when we make lime from limestone. So that is a different type of CO2, not only related to energy, but also from the natural process of building material processing system. So those things, when we really have a knowledge, or let's say the data about how much of the specific energy consumption or specific CO2 emission from the technology process of making building materials, and we have a baseline of how much CO2 is released when every specific kilogram of material is producing, and then from that we can bring that data into the volume of material using for every square meter of the building that we are constructed. So that is the way we do in Vietnam. It's more bottom up rather than top down. However, from the top down, we also see that when we have specific energy embodied for 1 square meter of floor area we build up for each type of building, then we can multiply it with the building stock lot floor area of that type of building to come up with the baseline of emission, with the inventory for building emission from the embodied energy. So that is the methodology we taking into account for Vietnam, bottom up with every each of the specific material manufacturing, and then using in our within the country, and separate from the materials that we export to another country, like production from Vietnam. So that's just about how we see the roadmap, that we can include emission from embodied energy during the production of building material and during the whole cycle of the building where the material is really incorporated in. Just few things to share. I don't know whether you, as an aspect, to talk about, and I may present. And you also, Madam, she is also the acquisition from our Vietnam Association for civil engineering and environment, joining me to join our event. Thank you very much.
Great. Hi there. Thank you so much, Kim. That's really really interesting to see how much you've already done on this topic, and I think it will be very interesting for us to maybe even have another more detailed conversation about this, because it's quite complicated, and it would be interesting also to understand the potential for kind of regional collaboration on some of these data collection activities, platforms, databases, etc. So thanks a lot. We'll move on now to the poll answers on urban planning and resilience, and here they've been done as 2 separate polls. So maybe so I think maybe to support how we've been talking about it, maybe we could look at both of them and then kind of have a discussion. So with Brendan and Brian, please feel free to jump in and let us know your thoughts on these. So we were particularly looking into how common is the practice of integrated urban planning. Sorry, I'm hearing a bit of echo. I think that's better now. So how common is multi-level governance, so across different levels of government, municipal, provincial or state and national. We've been talking about that also in the new buildings section, and how important that is. And then in the development of city master plans, how integrated are master plans across different topics, so across energy planning, transport, resilience, safety, all of these areas that have co-benefits, and how are they integrated into the planning process. And it seems to be not uncommon generally, which is great, and seems to be quite, I mean, some looking at by when could certain things become more common. A dedicated agency at municipal level with adequate skills and resources on average is quite soon, but there seems to be also quite a lot of answers towards the further end. So that's quite interesting. Brendan or Brian, if you would like to jump in and make any remarks, please do.
Yeah, I'm happy to step in first. So, I mean, from what I'm seeing here, yeah, a lot of consistency saying, well, urban planning is out there, urban planning is happening, and there's, you know, the urban planners are thinking about sustainability. But I think that there's maybe there's a level that they're at right now, but then there's a more advanced level of urban planning, and I would say maybe control over you know, the actual density of the buildings and the more, you know, forward-looking transit-oriented development and forward-looking, you know, from small cities to mega cities. So I think there's probably absolutely cities do have urban planners on staff. They are doing their work, but maybe they're approving things within existing master plans, whereas maybe the master plan should change. And anyway, that's kind of what I'm reading from this, is that there's certainly a level that's quite common, and maybe there's a more advanced level that's not as common. Brendan, your thoughts?
I think on this theme of integrated planning, I mean, we're seeing a lot when it comes to developing plans. There needs to be a focus on that the plans are financeable. And quite often we don't see an alignment with what's happening in the financial sector as far as planning for example, capital market development, or, you know, developing the legal frameworks to allow municipalities to access financing for implementation of the strategies. Things like legal frameworks and capacities to procure, you know, effective public-private partnership contracts, you know, green taxonomies to allow, you know, green bond issuances at municipality levels. So it's not just an integrated activity across the different urban systems, but also about how, you know, how other policy areas are sort of aligned with these planning activities. I think that's probably another comment I would provide.
Thanks a lot. That's a really good point. And we'd be really interested in I mean, in the development, over the course of the development of this roadmap, we'll be looking at showcasing some of the effective financial mechanisms that could be, that would be required as a kind of enabler of these plans and the implementation of the actions that we're talking about. So if you, if we look now at the results on resilience, sorry, I'm squinting a bit, it's quite small. In terms of Ian, the first one, if you go back one slide. Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Thank you.
So how common, so resilience in building codes is in some, that doesn't seem to be very uniform. And presumably that would relate to the fact that different places and different building codes will be addressing different kinds of risks, and some are more relevant in certain areas than others. Risk assessment and mapping does seem to be relatively common as well, which is good to see. And if I'm looking at the other one now, by when could they become more common? Again, quite soon. So it would be interesting to, I guess here again, to your point that you made, Brian, to some extent, you know, buildings and earthquake zones are likely to have a sort of risk framework and strategy to deal with that risk. So perhaps the question is more around what types of risks and are sort of heat stress risks and risks that could be dealt with by better design of buildings. Are those being mapped out and addressed in the same way? So maybe if either of you could pick up on what these maybe less common risks related to resilience and buildings might be, that would be really useful.
Yeah, I think you had it spot on. What I was going to say is the heat action plans, you know, are relatively uncommon right now, whereas yeah, earthquake proofing and flood proofing cities is maybe a lot more common. In addition, the ability for cities to understand the resilience of populations from a mobility perspective as well. Like, so how close is your office to your home, or you know, your work location, and that kind of urban planning that enables people to walk or bike to work because their building that they live in is close to the building that they're working in, or at least accessible between those 2 points. I think that kind of resilience is probably less common in many of the cities as well, as opposed to most of the transport work. When you leave it up to just sort of the transport industry, as opposed to bringing in the building industry, if you just get the transport industry, they're just trying to move people as quickly from through different areas, not necessarily connecting people where they live and where they're working. So Brendan, over to you.
Excuse me. So I guess that some of these, I think a point, these soft measures for resilience are often ignored. You know, the idea, the sort of need to sort of enhance networks, but you know, social networks, connecting, making sure that people are connected, helps you know, people adapt to climate events and extreme weather events, and generally makes the cities more resilient. So so it's this balance of having both soft and hard measures, I think, is also quite important.
Thank you so much. Some really good points there as well. So in the interest of time, I'm going to move on to the last topic, which is clean energy, before wrapping up this session. So in looking at how common integration of on-site renewable energy, that does seem to be pretty common. However, digital tools to enhance flexibility, as Ian was saying, to sort of make sure that the buildings play their part in helping to integrate into the system is less common, and mandatory provisions for renewable energy and flexibility on site also less common, but could be common relatively soon. So it seems like these sort of confirming the areas in sort of action areas of how buildings are going to be able to support the integration of cleaner energy. Because if we're talking about net zero carbon, nearly zero carbon buildings, that can't be done without talking about the energy sector also. So if anybody from the panel would like to make any comments here, Ian, I might come to you, but if any of the other panelists want to step in, please do.
Yeah, I'll just note how it's interesting to see the integration of on-site renewable energy, you know, relatively common, you know, as it shifts around, but around the mandatory side. And I think this is where interesting, we framed it as mandatory provision for both renewable energy and flexibility. As we see, these are really the critical pieces around the regulatory provision that allows for integration to be either, you know, a business model better, more resilient, let's say, to changes in kind of, you know, market structure, the ability to sell power back. You know, those are the things which can really make the difference around whether or not getting on-site renewable, integrating that with a grid is a successful outcome. Because often is the case is that, PV, say, installation, expensive upfront capital costs, on-site usage is going to be variable depending on what the setting is. So for large commercial sector buildings, that's not going to be such a challenge because of a lot of the energy demands. But when we're looking at, say, residential setting, the ability to sell back is really critical. So I think having the tools that are available there, policy and regulations, but then shifting around how you support mandatory for new buildings and certain classes of buildings going forward would be really important.
And I have one quick reaction, which is it's interesting, the difference between the on-site versus the community scale. And community scale is theoretically much more cost effective, but obviously with the use of coal and natural gas, investments that have been approved for a long time, it's interesting that is essentially lagging here compared to the on-site renewable, which is, obviously, if a building owner or developer believes that it's going to be more cost effective for them or a better selling feature, then it's becoming more common, which we're seeing here, which is interesting that, that should also be the case for the energy sector as well on the community scale, but it's obviously lagging on site with this in this poll.
Maybe just
thank you.
Sorry, Maxine, go on.
No, go on, Brendan.
I just wanted to say, this issue of the regulatory framework allowing the flexibility of building owners and operators to have the options for rapid decarbonisation is really becoming a foreign direct investment issue as well. So we're seeing, that it should be a central part of industrial policy, not just as far as the mitigation element, but as we're seeing sort of multinationals becoming, more sort of taking a more environmental leadership role, and in schemes like the RE100, you'll have, particularly a lot of ASEAN economies that have big manufacturing hubs, providing the space through sort of, direct procurement of direct PPAs, for example, is going to be a really important element of the energy policy going forward to sort of attract FDI going forward. So maybe just a on that.
Yeah, thank you so much. Some really helpful points there. And we have 5 minutes now to wrap up, and I think I just want to really thank the audience and the speakers again for sharing your thoughts through the polls and jumping on here. We obviously recognize that polls, we can't draw too big a conclusion from these polls because people are responding from different places, different countries, different sort of levels, cities or national perspectives, but we'll be looking at the data behind these polls after this to see whether we can see any patterns, because we're really interested in getting a bit more sort of disaggregated understanding of, on one hand, this roadmap is for ASEAN as a region, but we want to be able to be as specific as we can with targeted recommendations based on, recognizing that countries have different things in place already and are at different stages. So this leads me on to talk about our survey. We're launching a survey that we'll send, the links are here, but we'll send it to all of the participants after this session. But we have a collaboration website that has the link to the survey on it, and also a little bit more information about the project, so the buildings, both the buildings roadmap and the cooling roadmap. So you'll find some information there about what we're doing and all of the latest information on when we'll be having a next meeting, a next webinar, and whether you have any case studies or thoughts or ideas, we're really keen to hear from you. And we've got this survey, that's the second image in the bottom right hand side. to try and collect some more information. So similar kind of style to the Mentee polls that we've been going through today, but with a few more questions just to help us build up this picture of our understanding. So we just wanted to let you know about that, because we'll be in touch with all of you, and we really hope that you can that we can carry on this conversation and keep going into this. So Ian, next slide, please. Yeah, that's the survey. And so in terms of the next steps, just to let you know what our timeline is, we're working on a first draft of both the cooling and the buildings roadmap by the end of April. And then from April to July, we're going to keep working on them. We'll be holding more webinars and events and opportunities for people to make some comments and contribute to this. We really hope that you'll join us for those. We'll also be talking to we're working closely with the ASEAN Center for Energy and the ASEAN Secretariat to also help compile some of the data that might be out there, so that we can create some baselines and sort of gather and build on all of the work that we know is already going on in the region. As we've heard today, there's a lot of initiatives going on in this space, so we really want to be able to build on that. So if you have any good case studies, as I said, reports or data sets to help us in this journey, please do get in touch, and please do keep in touch to participate in future conversations about this roadmap. This was really kicking off the process so that you can see roughly how we're addressing it, how we're thinking about these problems, and invite you to come on this journey with us. So the second draft will be due in July, and the final draft will be in October. So we have some time, and we'll be I think it'll give us enough time to revisit these challenges and continue to dive a little bit deeper. So that's it. I'm really pleased that we're just about in time. I think in 2 minutes we'll be kicked off this platform and go back straight into the main session. So I'm glad I was able to get to the end and to really say thank you to all of you, all of our speakers, and all of our audience. If you just go to the next slide, please. My email address is there, but you'll see it. We'll send an email again later to really keep in touch. And if you have any remarks, I mean, I'd like to invite, it's a shame that we couldn't do sort of final remarks, but we've covered a lot of topics and we've covered a lot of ground today. But I think we managed to really get some interesting insights and some good discussion. So thank you again. And now I guess we just wait until we zoomed out of this window and out into the main session.
Hi, Maxine.
Oh,
sorry.
Go ahead, Emily.
Just
please.
to interrupt. I'm watching the other session. They're still going a bit. So feel free to take a couple. I'll let you know before we cancel, before we go back into the plenary. So if you want to take a couple extra minutes, please do.
Okay.
So Maxine, I was going to add just one thing. Perhaps I could just even show people the site, because I think it'd be really great. One of the features that we're wanting to request from yourselves is to input information, reports, examples and the like. And so this is the site that you can come to, and you'll see there's lots about the roadmap that you can find. The meetings, the webinars, this one will be there soon. So for the buildings roadmap, we have an area where we have, for example, just a little bit about what the roadmap is, and we have the survey here, which you can input on, which is a more detailed version of what we were doing today with the Mentee polls. But what I wanted to highlight was this area here, which is our knowledge base. And what we're hoping for everyone to do is to participate by sending and sharing reports. Don't worry if they're only in local language. This is really valuable. Whatever you'd be willing to share with us, so that we can get a better sense of the information that you're aware of. And also here, a document that you can start to write links down in and really get a sense of for us, whereas we can gain more information from yourselves. So both of these can be live by anybody to add into. So you just click them and then you can add more content here. So same with the report. I believe that the knowledge base people can add into. Right now it's just showing you because it's in mine, but I think it should be there. If not, if that doesn't seem to work, we'll kind of fix it. But you can always send it to Maxine as well. So I just wanted to highlight on this for just a minute to be able to seek your request, and I'll just put this in the chat as well so everybody has access to it. The final thing, probably just as you'll have seen, Kiandia has requested if you could fill in a form to get a sense of how the event has gone. Evaluation of everything you've seen today would be really helpful for knowing how we can improve future workshops as well. We really rely on your own time and interest, so we'd like to make them as informative and engaging as possible. And perhaps, Maxine, while we wait for the last little bit, I know that Brian and Brendan, you've stayed on very generously, and if there's anything else and Brian as well, you've been a part of the road mapping process in its very early days, but if you have anything else you wanted to add to this whole process, particularly for your setting at SE for All.
Yeah, no, I'm really happy to see that this roadmap process has come to this point where there's both a buildings and a cooling one, two really important topics to me, and really happy to see the development of this buildings roadmap that's really going that next step, which is to make it functional and usable by the countries. And so I definitely I think it's going to be important on the data side. And, I think we often talk about the data gaps, but actually there's a lot of data that's already out there. So as Ian was showing the knowledge base, I think it's going to be really important to look at even secondary or tertiary data points that might be useful, such as what's expected population growth, what's the impact of COVID-19 on income levels, and just even data points like that could be very useful for this as a roadmap. And recognizing that our baseline, our starting point is always changing. So I recommend everybody to provide even data points that are not directly related to the buildings industry.
Thanks, Brian. We appreciate your call to action.
Thanks, Ian. We're ready to go back into the session now, so just say goodbye. Oh.
Okay, well, thanks so much, everyone. That was an abrupt stop screen sharing, but other than that, appreciate everyone's involvement, and we'll see you at the main session.
Thank you very much, Michael, Dr. Zulfikar, Dr. Ian, and Maxine for a really interactive discussion in both rooms. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now rejoin the breakout session summary. Please join me in welcoming Septia Buntara Supendi. He is the manager of the Renewable Energy and Energy Efficiency from ACE, and also Maxine Jordan. She is the energy analyst from the International Energy Agency.
Thank you, Nela, for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a terrific discussion in the breakout group on the cooling roadmap. I couldn't think of a better way to begin our stakeholder consultation for this project. We discussed a number of important topics today that will be front and center in the space cooling roadmap under development. We noted several information, including electricity consumption is rising currently dramatically with significant impact on the grid. We need more and more systems to ensure the new technologies are energy efficient and support the region on energy intensity reduction. Number of regional efforts are available in the region, such as initiative from the ASEAN Center for Energy on promoting of higher efficient air conditioner through harmonization, also with other dialogue partners and international organizations. The sessions also provided a baseline of cooling in the region, for example, on AC sales, cooling's impact on electricity demand and share of peak demand and carbon emissions in the past, and different future scenarios depending on whether we take sustainable cooling path or one based on the current settings. And then we moved on to talk through the policy packages and elements that we'll discuss in the roadmap that can support sustainable space cooling in ASEAN over the past and also the coming years. We get a number of insights on the options to focus to support the finance through insurance for energy efficiency on industry and hospitality. We also noted one of the barriers from selected countries is lack of bankable project and limited project pipeline. On sustainable cooling, we also recognize it's not only we develop into a system, but also could be as a service for future development. Our two panel discussions touched on a range of crucial pieces of these puzzles, looking at the roles of different elements of space cooling policies and programs alongside business models and finance that can facilitate an energy efficient space cooling future for the region. We'll be announcing a number of cooling webinars, so please stay tuned with us. Please do get in touch with the ASEAN Center for Energy and the IEA if you have any study case, data, and policy information that you can share with us. I would like to hand over the floor to Maxine, please.
Thank you, Sebcha, and thank you, Nella. So in the buildings breakout session, we also had a really great discussion. The building roadmap covers 8 themes, so we covered a lot of ground, but we managed to get through talking about urban planning, new and existing buildings, materials and embodied carbon, systems and operations, materials and clean energy. We heard about some of the some really exciting projects that are already happening in the region across those themes, and also thanks to Mentee and live polls, we managed to get a snapshot of the current status of policy in the region and policy gaps, as well as discussing some of the potential solutions that we'll be exploring further as we develop the buildings roadmap. So in the first session, we discussed new and existing buildings and systems and operations. And in the second session, we covered materials, urban planning and resilience, and clean energy. Some of the key points that came out across both of these sessions was around the need for both a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. So we heard from a lot of different projects that are already happening at both of these levels, and sort of reinforcing the need for more integration across different levels of national and municipal level implementation, and how ultimately buildings action can support defining and reaching NDCs, as we saw through the progress on the Vietnam buildings roadmap. Another key point was around data, data being a challenge to enable the development of benchmarks and the baseline. However, it was also highlighted that a lot of data is already here, given the number of initiatives already going on. Therefore, we really look forward to building on these. And we launched our sort of, called it a knowledge base collaboration website, where we hope to encourage users and stakeholders to contribute some of the reports that they're using, some of the data sets that they're coming across, to really be a bit more coordinated in how we use information and activities that are already going on. So I think I'll stop there on the main points from the session in the interest of time, but wanted to highlight the launch of this website that we'll be sharing with all of the participants. And we also launched a survey to gather additional data and additional insights into, again, the current status of policy, and just diving a little bit deeper into the topics that we talked about today. We'll also be following up with a number of buildings webinars as for cooling, so we really are looking forward to keeping this conversation going, as this is just the beginning. So thank you again to all of our excellent speakers and to our audience for sharing their insights and getting this work off the ground. So thank you. I'll hand back now to Nella.
Thank you very much, Septia and Maxine. Before I end this workshop, I would like to invite Melanie Slade from International Energy Agency to deliver the first closing remarks.
Thank you, Nella. I just wanted to say thanks, everybody. Thanks for all of your time, your interest in this work, and hopefully before becoming collaborators in this work going forward. So I won't take up any more of your time, but thanks to the sponsors and our chair people and all of the participants. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much, Melanie. For the second closing remarks, now I would like to turn over the microphone to Marigel Desagon. She is the head of Energy and Minerals Division from the ASEAN Secretariat.
Hi, thank you, Nella. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm honored to briefly speak for the ASEAN Secretariat in this virtual workshop this afternoon and to have had the opportunity to listen firsthand to the discussions, inputs, and insights put forward in this first of a series of important stakeholder engagements to draft the very first ASEAN roadmaps for EE buildings and cooling. As mentioned earlier during the opening, these drafts will be considered by ASEAN member states as the region works to achieve the ambitious targets set forth in the ASEAN's Energy Sectoral Work Plan, which we commonly call APAYEC. The ASEAN Secretariat joins in thanking our speakers, experts, moderators, organizers, and all stakeholders who have actively participated this afternoon, and those who will continue to engage with us going forward as ASEAN threshes out the draft roadmaps further. We acknowledge, of course, the participation of the 10 ASEAN member states led today by Thailand, Dr. Pongpan as the able chair of the ECSSN, and Brunei Darussalam, Mr. Abdul Salam, who is hosting this week's series of EEs and CSSN meetings. We thank the audience and stakeholders all over the region and beyond who have taken time to be with us today. And we hope that we will continue to capture your interest and support. And of course, by saying that, to continue to engage with the surveys and also the requests for information that IEA and ACE have been mentioned earlier. We would also want to express once again our collective appreciation from the ASEAN Secretariat's end towards the Australian government, earlier represented by Mr. Adrian Gilbert from the Australian mission, and who we have also worked with along with his team to get this project started with IEA. The Australian government has consistently supported ASEAN economic community building, and this is the fourth project on energy that AADCP has supported consistently and without much fanfare, and which also happens to be supportive of ASEAN's collective goals relating to greener recovery from the pandemic. Huge appreciation also goes to IEA, especially Ms. Melanie Slade and Emily's team for this specific project. And we, of course, depend on IEA for the primary delivery of this project. And it's a collaboration with ACE, our ASEAN Center for Energy colleagues, who have been instrumental in helping convene today's workshop and moving this also forward in the succeeding stakeholder engagements. We hope everyone will continue to be engaged and through April to June this year. And the aim is for us to have a sufficiently firm draft by September that would have heard a widest set of stakeholders and that would help guide ASEAN's cooperation towards greater efficiency in cooling, building, and even in construction sectors. This afternoon impressed upon me the breadth of cross-sectoral, both horizontal and vertical engagements that are needed to get these roadmaps through and to get them actually implemented. And all in the service of our common interests and the undeniable imperative for sustainable energy transitions in our region and every corner of the globe. Once again, thank you and have a good day or afternoon or evening to all. Back to you, Nella.
Thank you very much, Mary. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Pongpan Farasayan to give the last closing remarks. He is the chair of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network from Thailand.
Thank you, Nella. Good afternoon to you all once again. With the end of the workshop, on behalf of the Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency, Thailand as a E&C SSN coordinator, I believe that we all have discussed and deliberate on various aspects of the roadmap on energy efficiency, on energy efficient in building and cooling. I also would like to thank our panelists and moderator, IEA colleagues in both breakout session and both plenary session for your expertise and case study. Thank you all participants for your attending, and thanks for coming out in number. I hope you get some useful information, ideas, recommendations back home. Last but not least, this workshop cannot happen and wonderfully succeed without such a great collaboration between Australian Mission to ASEAN, IEA, ASEAN Secretariat, ACE, and the host country, Brunei Darussalam. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for your hard work, and we look forward to the coming activities, recommendation, and roadmap of both building and cooling under this project. I wish all of you a pleasant day and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our workshop for today. On behalf of the organizer of this workshop, thank you all for making time in your busy schedules to join us here this afternoon. I wish everyone here a pleasant day and evening. Bye-bye.